So I've been seeing so much more of MSG in food, and MSG is not really kind of spice, if you'd even call it, used that much where I live. But I know that every fast food joint uses it, and every time I look at a cooking video from an American like chef or just generally home chef, they always tend to talk about MSG, and there's like a lot of discussion about it being bad or good for you, like being just generally really bad for you or not bad for you at all. And I kind of want to look at this video talking about that myth.
The internet is an amazing place. It's full of millions of answers at our fingertips. Yet at the same time, it's chock full of misinformation, more specifically in food. Even I myself have found things that I thought were real cooking facts from chefs that I worked for ended up being completely wrong. So how do we figure out the truth when it comes to questions like, do you need to wash your chicken before cooking it? Or is MSG actually bad for you? So today we're gonna put these age-old food myths to the ultimate test. Of course,
okay,
but more specifically, we're actually going to try these things to see if they're actually myths or facts. So with all that being said, let's begin with number 1. Myth. You can test your pasta's doneness by throwing it at the wall, and if it sticks, it's done. I have pasta cooking right now.
But why would you ever throw, I've heard this before. Why would you ever throw your pasta at a wall?
Not cooked. Oh, now this is
also, can't you just like, I don't know, I feel like I don't even need to touch it to know if the pasta's done. I just use some kind of object to like move the pasta, and I feel like it's done.
How do I know this is undercooked? Take a look at the inside. That is dry pasta. More specifically, cooked pasta, you can't snap in half like that. Do I even need to show anything else?
It should be so basic. That is so basic.
There we go. That's also undercooked, I should add. Holy myth busted. Myth. Storing bread in the fridge prevents staleness.
I hope one of the question is if it's okay to microwave frozen sausages as 3 meals in a day. You should never microwave anything frozen.
To put that to the test, 1 loaf of bread. Cut it in half. Both of these will be wrapped in plastic wrap.
Pasta la vista.
Oxygen from getting to it. No air is getting in this bread. So we'll leave 1 out and place
just air fry it. Yeah, air fry it. I love my air fryer.
In the fridge for 4 days.
Oh my god, I love it.
Out for 4 days. The one that was in the fridge is softer, but they are both stale. So we're gonna toast.
Air frying takes ages. It takes like 2 minutes.
First off, I just want to clarify, I would not eat either of these straight up. Both of them need to be toasted to be brought back to life. We got the fridge one right here and the room temp.
Bro, that's a lot of butter.
They come back to life after they toast. First, we have the room temperature one. Beautiful toast on that. Come on, man.
You need a new air fryer.
One did not toast as quickly. They both look the same. The refrigerated one didn't get as much browning because it was cold in the pan. That really doesn't matter. We just needed the heat to bring it back to life to see if they both meet at the same level texturally.
Interesting. I don't like microwaves, nice but I love my air fryer.
I wouldn't know that this was stale beforehand because I toasted it and heated it up. The refrigerator,
but it's great to have, like, you save so much power on it.
It tastes like fresh bread. You can see that the inside is like spongy and moist, whereas this one doesn't quite tear as much. It's not quite as tender. It kind of worked, actually. I will say, it didn't stop it from going stale, but it did retain some of its best properties a little better. So I'm gonna say myth is true. Myth. Washing cast iron with soap removes the seasoning. A little rinse with soap after cooking, I don't think it's gonna ruin the seasoning, but let's test it. We have 2 pans. This one has been washed with soap. This one has just been catered to with hot water, no more, no less. What's the perfect way to test a cast iron pan seasoning? Frying an egg. We're gonna oil both of these up. We're gonna add 1 egg to each pan. Oh, been a long time coming, I'm cooking on the range. Long time coming, I'm cooking on range. They're both frying pretty much the same. This one's already loose. So
by air fryer, do you mean convection? No, I mean an air fryer.
And the one that was not washed with soap does the same thing. Wow, look at that. If you build up a proper seasoning, it does not matter. Clean your pan, you nasty. Maybe don't let it sit in soapy water for days and hours and weeks. Good Lord. Myth busted. Myth. If your chicken is pink, it's undercooked. Now,
I don't even know, like, how do people think about some of these myths, like, overall? Like, why would that even matter?
The chicken in front of me. This one, salt and pepper, seared. This one, lightly cured, so it is slightly pink. The color pink is an indicator of the fact
I don't have it. You should get an air fryer. Air fryers are great, dude.
In the color. So
it's like the best thing ever.
This has some pinkish hue around the edge, and this one is more gray and obviously white. Guess what? They're both cooked all the way through. The only way to tell if chicken is cooked through is that the internal temperature when a probe inserted at the thickest part of the meat registers 165 degrees Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius, not the color. So myth busted. Myth: there's a difference between the shiny and matte side of aluminum foil. Let's find out.
Is
I
it?
have two small
No, why
sheet
would
trays,
that
one
even
matte, one
be?
shiny. Supposedly, there's a difference in heat radiation and this, that, and the other on how it cooks your food, depending on if it's matte or
Best way to
shiny.
fry fries as well. I love it, dude. I love it.
Yeah, diced potatoes going on both. I'm gonna try to keep this to roughly the same amount. Hit them both with oil generously, little salt, pepper, toss. I'm basically gonna
Generous with
set this based off
everything.
of, does one brown more than the other if left undisturbed? Into the oven they go. I will say there's a little more browning here, but it's kind of sporadic, and I would almost blame that against the oven. The single point is, on the matte side, you've got brown potatoes, and on the shiny side, you also have pretty much the same amount of browning. I'm gonna go ahead and say there's no difference. Myth busted.
It sounds like a dumb
Marinated
myth.
meat makes it more tender. We have one piece of meat, and it's definitely a chewier cut. It is the skirt steak. We cut it
Oh,
in
that's a
half.
good
One piece of
steak.
meat left alone, just salt and pepper. And for the other piece,
That's a
we have
nice
beautiful,
steak. Oh
spicy
my God.
marinade. This has all sorts of different acid in it. It's got soy sauce, chili oil, vinegar. It's got all the things you would expect in a marinade.
Brother,
So
that's
we'll
gonna
marinate
be
this
good.
overnight. This segment of skirt steak has just been seared with salt and pepper, no marinating whatsoever. Now, let's move on to the marinated steak. So I got a black steel pan, heating over medium high, a little bit of vegetable oil in there. I got my marinated steak right here. Just gonna pat it nice and dry.
Oh my
Otherwise it will
Lord.
not sear well. So our pan is hot. Got a lovely steak, gonna go in. Little chef press action. Now, I'm not gonna change anything about how I'm cooking this. I'm only gonna sear it straight up. I don't have salt and pepper on this because it's already been marinated. Flip. This is the one thing I don't like about marinated meat. When you marinate something and it has a little bit of sugar in it, you are gonna get much more quick browning. And
Yeah,
less
it's gonna
of a
burn
Maillard and
quick
more
as
of like a
well,
char
yeah.
and burn. It's great
Yeah.
on like a yakitori grill, but in a pan, it's quite difficult to sear. So I'm already seeing some things I'm not in love with. Here are our
God.
two
Oh
steaks.
my
They
God.
look
It looks
beautiful.
good
They cook very
though, dude. It
similarly.
looks so
Boom, boom, boom,
good.
boom, boom, very nice. Now first let's cut the marinated one. Okay, we have a nice medium rare, looking good, nice and juicy. Then we have the just plain seared. I will say this one is rested a little more, so it looks more pink, but they're both the same internal temperature. First, the non-marinated version. It's skirt steak, delicious, but it is chewy. Now for the marinated version, still chewing the salt and pepper. It's actually a little bit chewier. I don't think it's because of the marinade, it's just a piece of meat. Oh, really chewy. Okay, was there any difference in the chew whatsoever? Absolutely not. Matter of fact, this one was chewier. Again, I don't think it's because of the marinade, but it simply was. It did get a little bit of extra flavor, which I liked a lot, so there was somewhat of a benefit to marinating, and it did change the steak, but it did not make it more tender, and therefore that is a myth busted.
But is it really worth it? I don't know. Like sometimes the steaks don't really need to, you don't need to go that crazy about steak, man. A steak is a steak. It's just about the way you cook it in the end of the day.
Red liquid secreting from a freshly cooked steak is blood. Look at it. See how it's a little red coming out? Oh,
Yum, delicious
not
blood.
That is myoglobin. Myoglobin is a protein found in red meat, and all it does is transport oxygen to the cells. At this point, it's just mixing with a little bit of water that is already left in your protein. That's it. Myth busted. Myth: a smoothie is only
Bro,
a
I'm so
smoothie if
hungry.
use
You
ice.
tell me,
To set this up,
man.
Very simple. We're gonna do one
That
smoothie with
steak
ice
took
and
me
one
off.
without ice. We have these
Oh,
gargantuan,
God.
literally baseball-sized strawberries.
That
Here's
is a
an
big
iPhone, and
strawberry.
here's
Where do
the
you get?
strawberry. That's-
Damn.
So I'm gonna take these strawberries, add them raw into our blender. We're gonna add a touch orange juice, a little bit of honey, a little bit of ice, and blend. Okay, it's nice and chilly looking. Onto the non-ice version, all frozen fruit. Our orange juice, touch of honey, little splash of water. Now we blend. Take it. First off, look how much thicker this is. This is borderline a sorbet. I didn't put any banana or thickener or milk. It's literally just water
gaming
and
today,
frozen
yeah,
berries.
we're doing
And look
DD2
at the
later.
difference in texture. Strawberries with ice, it's just like cold juice. The worst thing about using ice is the froth. Because the ice turns from a solid to a liquid so quickly, as it's blending, you actually start to incorporate more air than you want to in your smoothie, whereas this is nice and tight, it's compact, it's gonna be thick, and it's not gonna melt in the blender, it's gonna melt in your mouth. Whereas
That's
this,
right.
you lose flavor.
The
because
left
you can
one is
dilute it
better.
with more water.
I think that people forget that ice and water removes flavor because it's water. It waters it out. It's that basic. And I don't know. I hate whenever you drink a smoothie, you kind of want to taste all of the fruit. You don't want it to turn it like, you don't want to turn it too watery. So I try to use as minimum ice as possible. I have frozen like berries and like veggies and stuff that I use in smoothies, but I don't add any extra ice.
Random bites of crunchiness, and it doesn't have that satisfying, thick, smoothie.
And many
quality that's
DD2, true.
gross.
Dragon's
Use
Dogma
frozen fruit in the
2.
greatest smoothies of your life. Myth busted. Myth. MSG is
We ain't
bad
playing
for you. MSG stands
fucking
for
Dark Souls 2. That's not
monosodium glutamate,
happening.
which is just an amino acid. People who claim MSG is bad for you have no idea that glutamate
This is the one I'm interested in. I want to know more about this stuff.
occurring in several of the foods that we buy every day. Here's a list of just some of them. But look, there are articles out there that say MSG is bad for you, and guess what, brother? We have a study from the Journal of Comprehensive Reviews in Food Science and Food Safety that found flaws in other studies that have attempted to prove MSG is harmful. That said, I do have a friend.
All blood is from the animals are drained after they're killed. Yeah. Oh, is this guy?
Look at this. Look what happened. Look, I have an important question. Is MSG bad for you?
What? Of course MSG not bad for you. It makes everything better. The king of flavor. But of course everything bad for you.
This is the science, man.
Alcohol, amazing.
The hell is MSG? It's like people would call it's like a spice in some sort of way that you put in food. And the way to describe it is that it changes the umami of the food. It just makes you more, it's like a salt.
Just use MSG in moderation. That's all okay.
Thank you, Uncle Roger.
No problem. I hate your marble, Uncle Joshua. Bye-bye.
Bye. Maybe there will be more science that comes out, but just like Uncle Roger said, in moderation, you'll be just fine.
Was it made of MSG?
Disclaimer, I am not a doctor, nor am I a scientist. So take that with a little grain of salt, or maybe a grain of
It's salt on crack. Yeah, it's salt on crack. It's very addicting.
Yeah, dried
dude.
pasta that's already been buttered and salted.
All like fast food uses MSG because it's like, you know, addicting.
Butter noodles, all right? And now we have fresh noodles right here. We have semolina spaghetti. We're gonna boil that real quick. Got another pot here. We're just gonna put some simple butter in there. I will say the one benefit of fresh noodles is that they cook almost instantly. They cook in just a few seconds, whereas fried noodles, you gotta wait for them to cook. It can kind of take longer than you want it to, and that's a little annoying. We got our melted butter right here. Our pasta going in. Little pasta water. The sound of love. I mean, that does sound like the sound of love, I'll tell you that much. We got our fresh noodles, very nice. They're salted, they're buttery, a little bit of that butter sauce right on top. Then we have our dried noodles. The dried noodles actually created a much nicer sauce because the dried noodles tend to have a little bit more dried starch on the outside. You get a starchier water with some dried noodles over fresh. They both look nice, so let's try them. First, fresh. I mean, it's delicious, it's amazing. Wonderful texture. Now, for the dry. They're both good. If I got a plate of this, I'd be.
I think the fresh ones are usually softer. That's my opinion. I feel like the fresh one usually they feel a little bit different.
Happy, and if I got a plate of this, I'd be happy. There are some things that have to be fresh pasta in order to be created, but is fresh pasta better than dried pasta? No, they're both
I don't
delicious.
think so.
Just use the
Yeah,
right
I think they're both good.
Busted. Does keeping a pit in your avocado prevent browning? We're gonna test it. So we're gonna open up our avocado. We're gonna wrap both of these in plastic wrap. One will be stored without the pit and one will be stored with the pit left in. I've also seen people do this with guacamole. I'll tell you one thing. What's the first thing that happens? It gets brown everywhere but where the pit is. So what are you gonna do? Get like 50 pits or stuff it in your guacamole?
Yeah.
It's been 24 hours. So obviously, since these have been cut, we do see some oxidation. On the one without the pit, it looks like this. What about if you kept the pit in? Wow, look, there's oxidation. I'm shocked. I'm sure that there's not any underneath the pit. There is oxidation where the pit was. To me, these look almost identical.
They look identical.
A slight amount less oxidation in the one with the seed, but it is so insignificant. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that this didn't work at all. But if it were to work, it would only work with whatever the seed is in contact with, not the area around it. So keeping a pit in an avocado does not completely prevent it from browning. Myth busted. Myth, you must only flip your steak once, or really any meat for that matter, to get a good sear. I tend to subscribe to this, but is it actually true? So I have a steak searing in here. I'm gonna keep doing that the entirety of this.
Like, why in reality would that be true though? I feel like you shouldn't flip it like a maniac all the time because of the way you cook a steak. But you know, like, why would it matter if you flip it that 2 or 3 times instead of one?
I've already done it for one side, and you can see how well this was browned. And that's while constantly moving it around the pan. Now, what am I doing here? I'm over-handling the steak intentionally. I'm picking it up, laying it back down, moving it to different parts of the pan. Surely that's gonna ruin the color on the steak, right? We'll see when we flip this over. Okay, so my steak's almost done. Let's take a look at this underside.
That is a fat steak,
I think
though.
it's good
Jesus.
to understand that leaving something alone will help it develop a more deep crust. So there's something to be said about leaving it there. But there's also something to be said about constantly flipping. You get more evenness because you're moving it around to different hot spots around the pan. Once one part cools down, the other one's hot enough to then take on the load. So I would say myth busted. confirm? It's kind of true and it's not true. If you mess with it too much, then you might not get enough deep of a crust. But if you don't mess with it enough, then you might not get even browning. So maybe try doing both. Myth, adding salt to water makes it boil faster. We're gonna put different amounts of salt in each of these to see if any of them boil faster. We have one pot of water that will receive around the amount of salt that I would typically add for pasta water, which is quite a bit. Now in this pot, we are quadrupling that amount, maybe even more than that. This is about a cup of salt. And last, we have 1 pint of salt going into this pot right here. Jesus, that like hurts my finger.
Oh my
I'm
God.
gonna crank all these over high heat to see which boils faster. So it has been 11 minutes and nothing has boiled yet. But what I will say is the one with the least amount of salt looks like it's gonna come to the boil soon. It has been 21 minutes. This was one of the biggest wastes of times during any film set we've ever had. So this one came a little bit faster to a rolling boil, but it's not the one with the most amount of salt. I guess ultimately you could say that adding a ridiculous amount of salt may marginally increase the speed in which that it boils. But ironically, the one with the most amount of salt isn't even close to these two. So myth busted.
People are just making things up, man. People are just spreading misinformation and lying on the internet. Oh my God, they're having a little bit of fun.
You need to rinse your chicken off before you cook it, right? You gotta keep that thing clean. Wrong. You actually don't have to. Matter of fact, you probably shouldn't. Just the rinsing process alone is more likely to spread bacteria around your kitchen, your stove, go into the air in your face, and that's a fact according to the USDA and the CDC. So what is the way to tell if your chicken is truly bacteria-free? There is one way, and only one way, and that is cooking your chicken to an internal temperature of 165 Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius when inserted in the thickest part of the chicken.
Nice.
Myth busted. Myth, you need oil to prevent pasta from sticking while boiling. Oh, I know the answer to this one. I have pasta that I quite simply dropped in this boiling pot of water and I did not touch. It's just sitting there and it's just gonna cook like that. If it sticks, then we'll try it with oil. So our pasta's almost done. I'm gonna give it a light stir. Oh, and look at that. It's not sticking. It's almost like it's sitting in a giant body of water. So how do you prevent your pasta from sticking? All you have to do literally once or twice during your 10 to 15 minutes that this is cooking, just give it one stir around the pot and it will not stick. Don't waste your money and the oil by putting it in there. And also, if you add oil to this, your sauce will not cling to your pasta as well. Myth busted. Myth, searing meat seals in juices. Only one way to check. 2 steaks. One steak, you're gonna go in the oven and roast it to the exact same temperature as this steak, which will be seared.
Bro, this guy has a lot of nice steaks. I'm kind of jealous, man. Holy.
Same cut of beef. It's actually from the same
He's
cow.
living life.
Salt, pepper. We're probing it because I want it to be identical to the oven steak. We have our.
You think Aswin can make pasta? No.
To get a even flat sear. Okay, I'm gonna flip my steak. We got a nice even.
You can only make
sear.
one
Look
thing.
at that. If the juices
That's a
ain't
steak.
sealed from that, ain't nothing protecting them.
That pizza he made, it ain't made. He didn't make
Our
that.
2 steaks. The question is, does
You should put
seal
shit
in
on top
juices?
of an
Here's a
already
seared
made
steak I haven't
product.
even cut yet. It's seared and it's literally juicing everywhere. This one was just cooked in an oven. There is some juice coming out, but honestly not as much. They've been cooked at the same temperature and rested the same amount of time. Here is the oven steak, a nice medium rare. That's the hole from the probe.
That one doesn't look that good.
Seared
That
steak.
one looks
They both
good.
lose juice, but honestly searing you lose a little more juice. That said, I still prefer to sear for almost every single reason in the book, including flavor, texture, basting it, so on and so forth. So long story short, no, searing does not seal in juices. Myth busted. Myth, you need a big pot to cook pasta. This is half the size of that pot. How's it gonna cook all of this when it doesn't quite fit in there? Well, sweetheart, don't you worry, because you just let that do its thing. This will fall in more quickly, but as the base of this cooks, you can begin to push the pasta in. This pasta's already fallen in, and this one, slowly but surely, will fit into your pot. Obviously, myth busted, but I should say, why is this important? If you don't have a big enough pot, sometimes you can make what you have work. Just think about that next time you go to make pasta. Hopefully this helps you in the future. Love you. I'll be honest, I learned a few things out of this, but I also kind of expected a few things out of this. Simple reality is a lot of these concepts were created way back when it was kind of like myths and wives' tales in food and
Yeah,
science.
people making
Today,
shit up
science just means
always.
better. Remember that. Love you. Bye. Subscribe.
That's a good video. I thought that was fun. That was really fun to look at. Man.